So, hello everyone. I am Roopa Shenoy, and right now I'm currently employed with Volvo as a chief project manager, and I have done several years of project management in different capacity. I've led complex projects, simple projects, if that you can find anywhere, and also multi-million dollars, close to 250 plus so far, and. In the last couple of years, I got to work with John, know him better as a friend, and that's where we thought we should co-author a book on project management, which is project management for automotive engineers. It's a field study, so unlike other books that you find in the market, it's more of a real-world examples, real-world attributes, and how you should actually, as a project management, react to it. So John, I give mic to you, and maybe you talk about your value transformation.
Thank you, Roopa. Hi, I'm John Quigley, Value Transformation, established in 2009, consulting and teaching product development topics, from one of which, significant part of which, is project management, especially in automotive. And that's why we essentially wrote this book. We have seen a number of project management mishaps, maybe is what we would call it,
yes.
Or poor decisions, thinking they're good decisions, and then you reap the benefits of those poor decisions, and reap in air quotes. So you learn something from actually doing the work, and to keep other people maybe as a cautionary tale, don't try to do this.
Yeah, and I think for me, what I have seen in my experience, the difference between a good project management and a bad project management is not huge. You know, most of the time the project management makes a plan and they can go through the plan, and in 80% of the time the train will go on the rails, but then they're not aware of that there will be a bridge. They have to change the track, they have to adapt, and that's the key point that is missing in most of the project management books. The PMP certification, how do you react? How do you actually see the wave and react to it? So know when to sail, when to fall off, let the wave go down, and then how to mitigate all these winds that will happen, and what to do if you hit a sand. So I think there are so many attributes of real life that you need to use that in everyday work of your project management, and continuously adapt to it.
Yeah, generally the books tell you, here's how you plan. Here's what you would do next. Here's how you execute. Here are some metrics maybe that you would monitor to understand how your plan is going. Or maybe they'll even not mention metrics. But the reality is that projects are different, every one of them.
Yes.
And that means that your plan is subject to revision at any time. And that includes changes because your customer decided they wanted more for less, or quicker, or any of a number of things.
Yeah, and I think for the automotive world, it is also important to understand the scope as you start the project, as in any theoretical book, will not remain the same. Because of the life cycle of the project is so huge, there will be some customer adaptations that will be needed, there will be some modification, or maybe the market has changed completely. And as a project manager, you can't put your hands off and say, oops, I'm not going to do that. So unlike building a tunnel under the London city, where you know the scope is this, and basically as huge and as complex that is, there might be some risks there, but it's not that you will change the full plan. But in automotive world, I think the plan can be just completely be scrapped and changed, and the project manager needs to adapt to it quickly.
That's true. And what is equally true is that the phases of the project itself, for example, if you're designing a product for the car, your focus is on the design of the product for the car. That's a whole different set of capability than the next phase, which is, can I actually manufacture the part at a yield that I'm looking for, right? At a quality that I'm looking for. Those are different set of skills and a different set of people to do that. So even with the life of the project, even if the plan remains the same, the people who take the lead, the talent that you need, is going to vary. Beginning, it's the creation part, it's the development. The next is the manufacturing part. You're going to need some verification skills, test engineers and things like that to validate and verify the product.
And I think, I just gave the example of building a tunnel under the London city. Just like as complex as that project sounds, you have to continuously adapt to these other inter uh, organizations, outer organizations, like the city councils. The same thing goes here within automotive world. You're continuously dealing with tier 1, tier 2 suppliers. Lots of these suppliers may not have the FMEAs done as it should be, or the quality is not at that priority level as any automotive company would have.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that you not just follow your internal process but also external process? So I think that's also a key attributes of automotive project management.
That's very true, Roopa. The fact that your team and your supply base is probably distributed across a globe, the developers may be co-located, maybe not. The supply base, subcomponents for the tier 1 come from tier 2 people that have to deliver parts to the tier 1 in time and at the right quality level, and managing that whole supply chain going through the development process, including prototype acquisition, is not a trivial process. That takes time and certain sets of skills.
And I think as a project manager, the biggest task or biggest challenge is no matter what you build, if it's a building in a Melbourne or building a car, I think we always have this huge clock ticking in front of us. And the expectation is how can you make it sooner? And like any other project, and I think building is a very good example, because you can't build the 65th floor unless you have built the 30 floors down. So same thing, but I think people fail to understand that you need to have a building blocks to execute it completely. You cannot have a helicopter pad built on 65th floor unless you have all the floors built in.
Yeah.
You can prepare for it. You can execute and do a prototype outside on your lawn, but you still need all the floors to be done. And the same thing goes for project management. The expectation that the cars or the trucks or construction equipment or anything should go out in the market as soon as the Legos come together is actually not the right thing or right...
Almost certainly not the right thing. Yeah.
Right thing. It needs to be tested.
It reminds me of a story. It's hard to believe that this can happen, but the thing is when the project team and the project manager is under stress, they will likely not receive the information you're telling them. It's happened more than once that a project manager was expecting me to start testing a product, for example, me and the department to start testing a product, when the software wasn't even available to run the test. And they were admonishing me that I hadn't started. And I said, well, look, I have the hardware, but I can't test the software until I get the software. There's a critical dependency here. The thing was, I'm sure he understood the logic behind it, but it wasn't well received, and probably because he's finding this out at 0 hour, rather than understanding that the software delivery was late, which he could have predicted, perhaps, if he had some interesting metric with the supplier.
But that you bring up a very interesting point, because lots of these PMs, either they have a very mechanical background or either a purchasing background or a design background. And how do you then adapt when you are trying to deal with this complex product, as to say? So it's not just necessary that you have a plan to build all the floors to develop a helipad on top, but it's also important to see that it looks good, it actually fits, and then people can actually go on the 65th
And
floor.
that the helicopter can land without collapsing the building, for example.
Exactly. Yeah, so you should have some basics understanding of the full complexity of the project, not necessarily the details, what torque or strength needs to be there, but at the same time have a basic understanding that it can bear the weight of the helicopter and the weight of the people on the floors. And unfortunately, we find so many examples where a mechanical guy would just say that, no, I don't understand the software, so I will just expect it should work. And nowadays, electronics is the differentiator on automotive. Most of the automotives have same basic structure. Most of them have they are trying to take care of the aerodynamics, and they have the same way of thinking in the product design. And then that's where the electronics comes in, and that's where the complexity of embedded software comes in as well.
The internal combustion engine is what it is, then displacements are going to be what they are.
Yes.
And they have a good grasp of those, and they don't radically change. And with cars going to self-driving, or some significant part self-driving or driver assist, that makes it even more of these embedded software, electronics kind of things creeping into the equation, as it were. For me, it's a healthy dose of skepticism. The project manager should not be trust but verify, as Reagan would say. If somebody tells you something, that's great. Now let's show me some evidence that actually tells me that's true.
So I think, John, in the book, we have tried to capture lots of things. I think to begin with, the business case. Business case is very important, or is, why are we doing this? And as a PM or as a CPA, as a chief project manager, or even as a financial person, as one of the stakeholders, you should know why you are doing this project. And I think that's the starting point or the inception of the project, and that's where we also make lots of mistakes because we have not defined it in clear words. Why are we doing this project? And once that's not defined, it will be a continuous catch-up game throughout the project life cycle. So I think that's one of the areas that we try to cover is why having a right model and also right assumptions. That's a key word as well.
And determining a decent strategy for achieving the objective that is probable for success, not one that maybe meets the business case, but has a probability of success in the 10% or less. That's not going to be very helpful.
Yes. And I think as the project takes on, I think we have described lots of different types of organization that a project manager can have. If you take a financial world or a construction world, that works similar to automotive world, where you have a complex organization, where you will have a mix of organization in some areas project managers have all the resources dedicated, some areas where they don't have. And I think it will be a balance on how you prioritize or escalate your demands and also allocate the expertise team.
That's probably a very significant one as well, because organizations generally, it's my experience, are not overly staffed. The places that we have worked at least to work at together, you have one starting lineup, and that's essentially it. So when you overbook your resources, or you have resources, talent, as I like to call it, when you have talent booked to multiple projects, then you have to prioritize those. And if you have it overbooked, then none of the projects are likely to be getting full attention. They all get a time slice of distracted attention to the objective, which further risks the project. That's one of the reasons why Agile and Scrum and those kind of methodologies seem to work. And the book actually goes through a few of those ideas in maybe mashed into a conventional project.
Yeah, I think agile practices that we have used, we have also have a chapter we have described it in chapter 6. It's a very good approach, and I feel personally that it should not, project management should not shy away when they're using agile to mechanical problems itself. For example, if you are developing a windshield, or if you are trying to develop a door, you should know first of all what your scope is, why are you doing it, and then break it down to the same methodology of agile, putting in the backlog, have a scrum master, and at least take it to a level where you know what your concepts are. And I think agile has been maybe understated a lot, and they've been using, lots of software companies are using it, like Amazon and big city groups and all those groups where there is a heavy software profile. And I think the same methodology can be used for automotive worlds as well.
And we have some experience with that, don't we, Roopa? There was a project we ran, it was a stage gate project, a very large emissions project, as I recall. And the top level of the project was ran as a conventional project.
Yes.
But the verification was cramped in some time, and we chose to run the verification as if it was a scrum. We ran it kind of like a scrum team, only instead of a 2-week burn down or a 4-week burn down, we used 6 weeks as our burn down chart, because that's essentially where the things look like they fit. The amount of work would fit in 6 weeks.
Yeah. So which was your favorite chapter to work in this book, John?
I think my favorite would probably be, actually I had two.
Okay.
It's the concept part, because I really like working on the front end stuff, because I think if you come up with the right approach, you stand a decent chance of being successful. And then a second, because I have a natural tendency to make, I'm not use the word critique, but not necessarily in the negative connotation. So the verification part would be another chapter that I think is kind of nice.
Okay.
For obvious reasons.
For obvious reasons, yes.
We have worked together in the past. She was a CPM and I was a verification manager.
Yes.
And it was a lot of fun, and it was a little bit traumatic at times, but it was great.
Yeah, we did not kill each other. We're
No,
still here.
or anybody else.
Or anybody
Actually,
else.
it was more like everybody else. I think we got along great, even though the stress was there, and that wasn't really the problem. Me,
Yes.
you, Martin.
Yeah.
But the other parts, the suppliers were really kind of interesting, is where the trauma really set in, I believe.
Yeah. My favorite part of the book, of course, I really completely enjoyed working with you. I think we learned a lot as we worked together, because also it was my first experience, and I have a different kind of respect now for authors, because it's a very difficult job to pen down your thoughts and also package it in a good way, in a more consolidated way. But my favorite part of the chapter was chapter 9, because it was a little bit different, because we tried to put our insight to the readers, where we describe lots of closure, the lessons learned, we talk about knowledge management, we also talk about soft skills that project managers should have. And one of the topics was, when we described about the lessons learned, was really a very good article that I have referenced from Harvard Business Review, is pre-mortem approach. Like we don't always do post-mortem.
Yeah.
Try to also do it, some sort of analysis while you are still in the project life cycle, to see what can go wrong and how do I prepare for that.
Yeah, that's a significant approach to risk management. In fact, that's what your risk management activities should actually try to uncover, are those potential areas. That's destruction or distraction for your project, something that can make your project fail.
And we have put lots of references in the book as well, and this particular reference is from Gary Klein, Performing a Project Pre-Mortem, is the Harvard Business Review September 2007 article, and it really describes on how it should be done and what sort of setup you should use, so that you think that the project has failed, and then you try to go backwards. How can it actually fail? Because lots of the culture in the company is the same, basically. The projects change, the project challenges change, but the culture you're still dealing with, and that is one of the most important aspect on the struggles as a chief project manager or a financial person or a stakeholders. You will go through the same things like resources or talents, or the money is not there, or the scope is not there. All those issues, based on the organizational maturity, organizational culture, you will go through the same issues over and over again.
Yeah, the culture, especially when it comes to escalating, can be a detriment. I've seen that a lot, where nobody wants to escalate because it feels like they're blowing a whistle on the play, or identifying something or some part of the company as not meeting expectations. But the reality is, if you let that fester, then your project ends up further behind schedule with every day.
Yeah.
Escalation is not a bad thing. It's sometimes necessary.
And having some sort of and at least also in the book we have described lots of these examples, and what is the impact of the project, like we described, when the resources are shuffled and there is a high turnover rate. In thinking that the project execution, since it has started, it will follow a curve, but actually it doesn't follow the curve. It has a dip, because the new resources comes in, it needs time, the team needs time, there is a new dynamics, it takes time to even understand what's going on and how to react to it. So I think that's another aspect that we have tried to cover. So as a project manager, you're a little bit aware that if your person A has left and it's replaced by B, you should not expect the same results. Right. There are chances that it can go very well, and the chances that it cannot go very well.
Right.
So the curve for certainly will take a dip. But do you stay on the curve, or you go up the curve or below the curve, is also probabilities that you should think about.
Immediately you're going to take a dip, and perhaps this person is a better choice for this job, and over time you will get above the curve. But she's right. You're right.
Yeah, And I think those are the soft skills that we have described a lot in chapter 9, and also throughout the book we have described about the speed bumps. When you have an execution going on, anytime you have a problem, or financial issues, for example, you don't have enough budget, you don't have the right tools, or you don't have the right machines to test, you will go through a speed bump and expect the project to take a significant halt or some sort of some sort of a pause,
Yeah.
and then have some plan to how you come back to the track.
Yeah, either come back to the track, or that pause impacts everything else. As in, that 2-week lull was something on a critical path, and so now your project is now shifted 2 weeks out.
Yeah, and I think as in the project we have described various times how, as a project manager, you should not try to please everybody, because that is not our job as a project manager.
Nope.
And it's not an easy task, and it's of course lots of escalation brings lots of risks, because as a person, because then you're trying to say that there is a problem all the time, and in general the management wants to hear good news all the time. So there is a balance, what to escalate, what not to escalate, and how to escalate, and we have described some of those topics. But in general, a pleaser cannot be a good project manager.
No, and you can't run around with your hair on fire saying this delayed, it's doomed, because a 2-week lull might have no impact on the ultimate schedule. You got to kind of think through every one of these situations.
Yes.
But she's right, a pleaser is not somebody. I tell people, I teach project management classes. In fact, I'm teaching some at Concord, for Concord City right now. And I tell them, a project manager has a bullseye on his back and a bullseye on his front. He goes to the executives tell him what they want, which is a bullseye on the back. You deliver this now, this much money. And you go and tell your team, this is what our objective is, and your team is telling you, well, we do this for a living, we know how this works, and you can't get there from here, and you still have to try to make it happen.
Yeah.
So your team is throwing arrows at you as well. You're caught in the crossfire between those who want something done a particular way, in a particular time and money, and the people who are actually doing it saying, no, that can't work.
And I think based on that, we also have captured some sort of in various chapters, how you should communicate. When you're communicating with your customer, the communication is different, because there you need a plan and say, this is what we are coming out with. When you're communicating with your stakeholders above you, you need to know what you need to escalate, what you should say as an accomplishment. At the same time, when you're communicating with your team, there needs to be transparency and put all the problems on the table. So the communication pattern from one project manager to different stakeholders is, again, has lots of flavors to it.
That's right. Especially the one to the team. If the team sees the situation and they know what this is, they know what the impact is, and you try and sugarcoat it like, this is not bad, it's going to be okay, or it's all okay. If you dismiss their perspective summarily, I don't think you're going to have much of a team for very long.
Yeah, and at the same time, also have as a project manager to know when to calm the team is also a talent, because there will be chances when there will be an actual fire and you will be the only one holding the water in your hand, and you should know how to help calm the teams, because the project still needs to be done, the execution still needs to be carried on, and the communication to the stakeholder that time becomes a little bit more trickier, and how to ask for help and ask for support.
Yeah, you have to walk that line between allowing the team the freedom to express themselves with regard to the situation, and quickly getting the situation under the best control that's possible. Yeah. You can't just put smother their perspective. You have to kind of do both simultaneously. Start with let them vent, and quickly transition from vent to solution as fast as possible.
Yeah, and one of the things that we have also discussed is know how to ask for help. Because asking help is also a talent. Not just asking help, but also asking the help for the right type. Yeah. I remember one example. One of the project managers needed help for time plan, which is very simple and one of the critical tasks, and it's a must-have. You should have a good time plan. But when he asked for help, he asked for help from a person who was another project manager, but he didn't have the expertise in that department. So these two people, one is the person who needs help because he himself was new in the organization, but he's asking for another experienced person, but that person doesn't have the details or the understanding of the interdependencies from the product design. So two people working great, spending 8 hours, and I came back to the room and I asked, what is the workshop about? And they said, oh, we have come up with a great plan about dependencies, and this is how my time plan looks like. And I asked just one question: what is your input and what is your output? And they couldn't answer that because they never thought that was an important aspect.
That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Input at the very beginning produces an output from some process, which becomes an input to the next process.
Exactly.
Which produces some process, puts an output for that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what I thought was, okay, this person did a good job by asking for help, but then he did not do a good job by not putting enough thought or thinking where or whom should I ask for help.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing we do as an organization, I think, not so great. Mm-hmm. And another reason why the book turns out the way it turns out is we bring people in as project managers who were once engineers in a very localized area. We bring people with project management skills from some other part of the organization or from external to the company, and we just expect them to know how we work, or how APQP works, or how advanced manufacturing works, and that's not really how a good way for success. Certainly you have to learn some on the job, but not all of it should be OJT.
Yeah, and also having, I think important aspect is the experience dealing with the complex projects, So how is the FMEA connected to the testing? How is the testing results connected to FMEA analysis? How is quality connected with some of your customer feedback? I think that kind of connection is completely missing in lots of organizations. Yeah. It's such a disconnect where you do a FMEA, you put a checkbox that FMEA is done. Okay, but you still have to have some sort of a follow-up, and the follow-up doesn't happen on Excel sheet. It happens on the test unit, and that connection is very important. And I think that's one of the places where some of the project does fantastic and some of the project fails.
Yeah.
Because
these are where the metrics that we talk about.
Yeah. Following the metrics is just one thing, and also having a capacity to think. Yeah. Why that process is there is another aspect that we have talked a lot about in this project.
Yeah, and if there is no reason for it to be there, if it serves no function, then it should probably disappear. But my guess is it serves some function even if you can't figure it out.
Yeah, I have another good example is I was in an FMEA session, and I asked one of the engineers, so what will happen instead of certain solution that is needed for a sensor, if you put water, what will happen to the test unit? And everybody in the room said, but why would you do that? I'm like, but that's your failure mode. The failure mode is something that someone will do to make it fail.
It can be an accident.
It could be an accident, and accident doesn't happen, but when it happens, how does your unit react, the test unit react? And they said, no, we never thought that anybody would put water instead of the liquid that was needed for the test unit. And I just thought that how as a human beings, we are not equipped to think of failures.
Yeah.
We are always optimistic. We want to think of good things in the project and think, FME is done, checkbox done, so it should not fail.
Yeah, generally as a population, we tend to be rose-colored glasses, and it's helpful, no doubt, at times in the project, but it's also detrimental. There are times when you really need to be thinking, especially in situations like that. Maybe water never happens, but if water does happen, it shouldn't be catastrophic.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Truck shouldn't or car shouldn't go careening off the road.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where I think it's important that some experience comes, and having that's where this book will help lots of the young engineers, the young professionals, and lots of cases of experienced people who have not dealt with the complexities of the project to say, okay, if something you have thought in the failure mode, that is bound to happen. And
And while this book is written for conventional product development, and by that I mean cars and trucks that are gas or diesel, there are aspects of this that would help out anybody doing electric cars, self-driving cars. You see a lot of complaining about, it's on LinkedIn, I'm connected to some people on LinkedIn, they talk about people who are developing, organizations that are developing self-driving cars, and they're usually IT firms. But IT firms don't have to worry about what happens if a little something goes wrong. You reboot the machine and you keep on going. But if you reboot it, if something goes wrong in a car, you don't necessarily have that reboot if you're doing 80 mile an hour down the road in traffic, right? So understanding how all these parts connect and understanding the systems interactions for both from the project and from the product perspective can help anybody along the way, especially those folks.
Yeah. And for me, I think the book can be applied in so many ways, not just in automotive. What I feel is, if you are a student and you aspire to become an engineer, or you want to work in automotive, or this book is an excellent guide to give you a flavor of what the real worlds look like.
Yeah.
When I was a young engineer and I started to work, I think our industry or our schools does not prepare us to go to the real world. So I think this book is an excellent guide to tell you the difference between theory to the practicality, in the simple words and simple examples that we have used. And so if you're a student, if you are a mechanical engineer or a chemical engineer, you want to work in not just automotive world, but anywhere, you will like the flavor of this book, because you can see the examples that will, like I gave you the example of developing a construction, tunnel under the London city, or you're trying to build a multi-story building for a helipad. You will find the flavors that you can use in your experience, and you will actually enjoy it, because that's where and you'll be surprised also that lots of people think that is possible. That you can actually build a helipad before building all the floors.
Or test the software without the software being in the unit. It's beyond me that question even would rise.
But it comes,
but
and
it
then
does.
It does, and then how do you react, and how are you more prepared to tell them, yes, if you don't do this, these are the things that you should be prepared for failures.
That reaction is probably a big deal too. How you react to it. You can't just aggressively go off and say, how do you expect me to test it without the software? You got to kind of lead them down the road in a good way.
So one other aspect I think, John, for me is that's very close to my heart is I also would like to encourage lots of women, young engineers, girls, and Krish actually took this book to the school.
Did he?
He took and he showed it to all his friends, and lots of their moms actually sent me a note that the kids were very happy. And they also wanted to talk to me.
Nice.
So I think it's also good for the young girls, and I feel for them, because yes, you should play with Barbie, but you can also work on engines.
Those things aren't mutually exclusive.
Yes.
That's
so
right.
I think it's fun to work on the kitchen sets, but you can also design a pink car. So
That's right.
what I would encourage young girls, moms, that you should build that thing in your daughters, that you can make a difference, you should dare to dream, think of a pink spacecraft, nothing is stopping you,
Yes, right.
and have confidence. And I would encourage more and more women to come to the engineering background, project management, because it's very unfortunate that I go to so many discussions and workshops, and I do not find any other woman except myself. And that is, and I feel that is a big part, because as you have more diversity, not just from a man and woman, but also from different parts of the world, it adds so much of different thoughts and beautiful discussions on how the applications are different, because all of us are wired differently.
Yeah. It brings in, gets us away from groupthink, or reduces the probability of groupthink. If we're all thinking the same, then there's probably some redundancy there. Some of us aren't needed.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just like the cars are getting driven, there are women population, and eventually we'll have more electric trucks, autonomous vehicles. We'll have more women, more young generation, female population, and there will be also, again, when you look at just the diversity of men, the diversity of women is huge. The way people are reacting to the situation, and having more and more women in not just automotive world, but also in project management, because I feel as a women, we are more multi-processing all the time, because we're trying to take care of multiple things from the house and the work and all that.
Yeah.
So I think that adds a different kind of a value.
Yeah, that's more like a project manager's set of skills, if that's true. Anyway.
It is, and it also adds to be. I feel that I ignore some of the issues because I'm so used to be chaos all the time that. And that gives me an ability to ignore some of the nuisance values, which I should not be focused on, and then it helps you to focus on the right, problems, right time, and how to react.
Not every problem, all problems are not created equal.
Yes.
Some do not matter and do not warrant escalation or maybe even any kind of rebuttal or reply.
Yes.
Some of them you better jump on, you better get on them really quick,
mm-hmm.
and get it to the top of the chain to make a decision as fast as possible.
Yes. And I think maybe, John, you can talk about the collaborations that you had with it for this book. I think you discussed with some of the A2 Mac 1 people.
Yeah, there's some graphics in there from A2 Mac 1. They did some tear down photos that are in there. I had some discussions with a lot of people, some people at SAE or with PMI, that's Project Management Institute, that had tried to get an automotive project management book written a long time ago, but it just kind of fell flat for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of stuff goes into writing a book, as you know. It's a boatload of research. You walk in thinking you know enough, and then you start doing the work, and you're like, well, I probably need to know more about how that works, and I need to know a lot more about that. And then you start seeing how all the parts are connected, and you have to go ask questions of people who are experts in those individual areas. And as part of that, you end up acquiring more knowledge on your own.
Yeah, and I personally, I read lots of Harvard Business Review, so I found lots of examples, why you should not spend too much time on early prototypes, for example. Even though that example was not related to the automotive world, but it clearly applies here.
Yeah.
And I've given the references to that, hopefully for all. So I would also request the readers to go through some of those documents and details and get more insight.
Yeah, there's one in there on Harvard Business, HBR, Harvard Business Review, I put in there as well. It's about distraction and time spent multitasking and its impact on a project. The myth of multitasking, essentially. I thought that was appropriate given that we take on N number of projects, and that N can get quite large, but we won't increase our head count to cover those projects. So.
Yeah, and that brings an interesting topic, because we have here in chapter 3 where we discuss about a triangle in which the PMI book talks about as the most of the critical aspects of project management. And oftentimes you go through the discussions where the scope continuously changes, but the expectation is the time should not change and the cost should not change. And it's a critical aspect, because your area, as soon as you change one aspect of your triangle, everything else should change.
Yeah.
If you're keeping your budget constant, the scope cannot be done. If you're keeping your time constant, something else has to go.
Right.
And I think that's where a project manager needs to level up their voice and say, hey, you are setting up more for failure. And if you can't argue with that, or if you can't win there, I think it's the best thing to do is put all the risks on the table and let the management deal with it and document it properly, because at the end it always comes to the PM that they have not delivered.
You have not delivered.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the very first thing you have to do to be able to make that statement or those cases. Understand the scope.
Yes.
And connect it to the cost and to the timing it takes to deliver as best as possible in a tangible way. This is not word of mouth scope management. You really need to have this documented. This is what we all agreed on. And then when they change something, you say, this is a change from what we agreed on, and it has these impacts, which is part of configuration management and change management in general, which the PM doesn't necessarily need to be an expert in, but the PM should understand those principles and the reason for that documentation he or she creates up front.
Yeah, and then it's also very interesting, because when you get the scope from the document, you basically establish some sort of a timeline, some sort of a cost. But as the project will move forward, you will know more. There will be technical difficulties. that could increase the cost. Maybe the vibration is too much or the noise is too much. And for that, maybe you need to do more tests, maybe you need to change the design, and then it all adds up, So I think there needs to be some sort of an understanding in the project management that there will be a problem. Back to the wind, and how you will react to it. When the noise happens, is it too much that you have to change the design? Is it something that you can ignore?
Right.
So the vibration is too much. Maybe is that your worst case profile, or maybe the worst case is not something that you have captured.
Right.
And then you have to continuously be ready to adapt to it.
Which can impact your schedule or cost, and there's nothing you can do about that other than either accept the malperformance of the product or increase the cost or schedule to deliver that, right?
Yeah, and then that brings up to the topic, because now your triangle has changed. Now you know more. Now you have much more risks, and some of the risks then become the facts. The steps taken on that is also very important, especially for automotive. I think it's true for all the cases. If it's an IT company and you're doing the transaction, if you find the issue, you should take care of it, because you're dealing with other people's money here. Same thing goes for construction and automotive. You are dealing with some of the problems that could impact, in certain cases, safety of lives of people. In certain cases, it could be the malfunction of the unit that could cause either a discomfort, or it could cause some sort of high-risk accidents to happen. And then you need to take that probability and severity into the consideration.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, you enjoyed the book? I know I was very difficult at times, but
I'm sure I was as well. I'm sure I was as well. And up against the edge of production, especially, it gets kind of challenging. But I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed writing the book with you. I enjoyed the collaboration with you. I would do it again. So if you want to do another one sometime on some other topic, I welcome the opportunity.
Yes, I enjoyed it completely. I think we have created a very good content of material that way people not just can just use in automotive, they can use it, like I said, project, young students can use it, young professionals can use it. For the heck, if you are in project management, you should read this book, because it was lots of good examples there.
Yeah, I would say even if you're not a project manager, if you're an engineer working in a project, and there was a guy, a mutual friend of ours, I'll only use his first name so we don't have to trace him back. It's Jacob, okay? J-Bob. He told me, after he was working with his project team, he said, I wish somebody would teach these engineers how to work within a project team. Because they're siloed, they tend to focus on their part, and they only see, at least sometimes, they only see the part they're working on. They don't understand how the part they're working on connects to all the other parts as a system.
Yes.
Right? And I think he had problems with that. So if you're an engineer and you do automotive work, you would see, if you read this book, you'll see how the things happen before you impact the stuff that comes to you, and how the stuff you do impacts the people downstream from you.
Yes.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think sometimes we miss the big picture view, even at an engineering level, because as simple as, like I was given an example of windscreen, you can't drive with a cracked windscreen. But at the same time, it's important that it is designed in a way that you can have it manufactured. It's also important that it has an aero performance. It's also important that it has an ergonomics performance. So simpler things has a bigger impact in the whole scope of work. And having read this book will help the engineers and the stakeholders actually to understand how it all fits.
That's true.
So thank you, John.
Thank you,
and,
Roopa.
and I really, like I said, I've enjoyed, and I hope this book will be a good one for people to buy and also use it for a long time.
Yes, I hope so too, and I look forward to whatever we choose to do for another collaboration, and even another video like this. I think we'll probably produce some more of these things. She's been around for a while. She's got a lot of experience. It's just good I like talking with her in general, and I think it's very helpful to get this stuff out there.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right.
Bye.